Hello everyone, and welcome to Saturday. A few weeks back I talked a little bit about how I wanted to build a computer strictly for streaming, a box that was dedicated solely for the purpose of streaming stuff to Twitch, and maybe also recording some stuff for YouTube as well. I had my good buddy Jeff help me, who has served as the editor-in-chief for popular computer hardware site techreport.com for many years. And he did a bunch of research, helped me out a ton, and finally came up with a parts list that would get the job done, while also meeting a few little requirements that I had as well. So I am very pleased to show the final parts list and finally build this thing today, because we've had these parts for a few days and haven't had the time until tonight. So let's build a streaming PC, shall we? Let's start by taking a look at the parts that we actually have here. And again, this all is courtesy of Jeff. I can put computers together, and I'm relatively okay when it comes to picking out parts, but he was the one that, first off, has all of the years of knowledge, much more than I do, but also did the research to figure out what specifically we were looking for to get the best bang for our buck, and also quality, you know, when it comes to specifically streaming to Twitch. So, one of my requirements was I wanted a very small form factor. That's why we went with the Fractal Design Core 500 Mini ITX case. So it's a very tiny computer. Very tiny computer. And the reason I wanted such a tiny case is because I wanted to be able to move it easily from room to room, because sometimes we do streams out here, like for breakfast stream, and then other times we do streams from the office for a gaming stream. I wanted one box to do all of these things, and I wanted to be able to just easily move it from one room to another. So that's why we have such a small box. And actually, one of the things that Jeff suggested that I pick up was this. This is the Gear Grip Micro LT harness. It's from Case Ace, and basically it's a strap that goes around the computer that turns it into a computer with a handle. So it's basically a GameCube. It's basically a big GameCube, and that's exciting. So I'll be able to very quickly and easily move it from room to room. The motherboard is an ASRock Z390. We've got a Seasonic power supply, 650 watts. This is far more power than you need, but the reason I went with something that was a little bit stronger is that in the case, like sometime in the future, we decide that we want to turn it into a gaming computer, we have the power already in there, and we can just throw a GPU in. Which leads me to one of the exciting parts of this build. There's no GPU. There's none in sight. And the reason is we don't need one, because what we're doing is all about the CPU. We don't need a GPU in here. So we're basically using onboard graphics that are coming from the motherboard, because you don't need a GPU to do streaming, which is pretty cool. Since I'm not doing any sort of gaming on this computer, and it's solely for the purpose of streaming, it doesn't have to have a graphics card. And that's really good for the budget too, because then all of the money that you would have spent on a GPU can be put somewhere else. And we'll get to that in a minute. We've got this is an NH C14S by Noctua, the cooler. And then I've also got an NF A14 fan, because this comes with one fan, and we decided we were going to put fans on each side. I also have a splitter cable, so I can make sure I get power to both fans. The primary system drive is going to be a 500 gig N70 Evo from Samsung. And as for the RAM, we've got Vengeance LPX, and this is 2 8 gig sticks of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM. Also have a 4 terabyte drive, because we're going to be doing some recordings, but then also we want to obviously save the streams locally. So that's why we have to have some sort of, local recording media in there. And then also I needed some way to control the computer from a distance, because for the most part, this thing is going to be used in here, and we're going to be using it attached to the TV, but we're going to be on the couch. So if I can have an easy way to control the computer from far away, this fits that need. It's a keyboard, but it also has a trackpad built in. I won't be touching it a whole lot, but the fact that it's all wireless is really convenient. Now, when Jeff asked for a budget, I told him $1,500. That was around the ballpark that I was looking to spend. I figured, with that much money, we could probably build something that kept the smaller form factor and was hopefully able to achieve like really good quality results. And Jeff said, you know, cool. And obviously, since he's worked for Tech Reports for so long, he has a wide variety of computer hardware just sitting in his house, so he could actually do a lot of tests with various setups, etc. So he decided that we were going to use a good portion of that budget, nearly half of the entire budget, towards the CPU. This is really important because when you're doing streaming, you have basically one of two choices. You can do hardware encoding, or you can let the CPU handle the brunt of the workload. From our tests, or I guess more specifically his tests, we found that the better quality results were coming from CPU. And we looked at both, even stuff that was, you know, at otherwise like the same settings, and personally it just looked better whenever it was CPU encoded as compared to hardware encoded. So that's why we went this route. That means that most of the budget, nearly half, went towards this. This is a Core i9 9th gen unlocked and very broken in shipping, and I don't know what the clock speed is on this. This is the i9 9900K 3.6 gigahertz specifically. And if you're interested in building this specific system for yourself, or just are interested in any of the particular parts, I'll put links to all of these things down in the description box below. Now that I have it out on the table, I can finally build this son of a gun. So let's get to it. The memory card ran out on the Blackmagic, but you didn't really miss a whole lot. I just had to connect the headers and get a few other final things in there, but as far as I can tell right now, it's all in there. And I have a lot to say about this build and the trials of it, but first I want to plug it up and at least hope that it gives me a good beep. Alright, so this is definitely the moment of truth. And I would say that I'm listening for a very specific thing, but I don't even know what I'm listening to because the motherboard does not tell you about any of the sounds and things that it makes. There is a small book for software talking about the BIOS, and then the instruction manual for the motherboard leaves out all of that information. So I'm just going to listen for something that sounds, you know, normal. So let's hit the switch over here. And then there's some lights happening in there. And power, you are power. I think maybe we're good. It did a few little kind of beeps. And then it stopped and now it's on. but I don't know what any of those beeps mean. I mean, maybe there's a better manual for this motherboard online, but if so, why didn't they put it in the box? I thought that maybe I was crazy, so I went through all of my stuff again to see if maybe I somehow missed a manual, but I didn't. So I went online to check the website for the motherboard, found the specific model, and there was a full user manual online. And I was like, oh, this is cool. This is something that wasn't included in the box. Neat, I'll read it. It also doesn't contain any information about the beeps. And the beeps are usually how you know very quickly, you know, whether things are good or if there is something wrong. And the problem here is that there was like three or four beeps. You know, there was a couple beeps, and I was like, oh, well, what does that mean? It didn't just start, but, you know, every manufacturer is different, so I don't know. Anyway, it's something I'm going to deal with tomorrow. Tomorrow I will actually hook this up to, you know, a monitor and a keyboard and start to go through the menus and try to get Windows installed, and then just see if there's anything going on. I'll also I'll talk to Jeff again and see if there's anything he thinks, because he has, you know, so much to know-how regarding all this. But I wanted to, before this vlog ended at least, talk about putting this together, because it was a trip. So things probably seem a little cramped, and if it seems like that, that's because it absolutely is. I have two fans here, and getting these fans on was very difficult. Getting everything to fit in the case was extremely difficult. There was a bay in this area that held drives, and that had to be removed. It was the only way that the motherboard with this particular CPU cooler would actually fit inside the case. And the reason that the top fan is lined up with the heatsink but the bottom one isn't is because the bracket that holds the power supply is in the way. So this was the only way I could even get this in here. And the cables are just like all willy-nilly, and this is, you know, sitting, you know, pretty low to everything, so I have got everything like kind of bent down. But the idea is that the air is being pulled in and then going down towards the CPU. So the bracket for the fan is on this side, so it should be fine. And you know, after the computer got started, it wasn't making any sounds like it was hitting anything, so I think it's okay. But you know, I guess time will tell. It is it's very tight though. The thing that really was difficult for me is that I've built a few computers over the years, but I've never done it in this form factor. Mini ITX is something. It's really something. Everything just barely fits in there, obviously, depending on what you're building. And the thing that was so upsetting is that when I first had this in here, I had the cooler oriented 90 degrees, and it was hard to try and, like, before I put it all together, I was just trying to like eye it and put it in here and like, is that gonna work? Is that gonna work? I'm not sure. So I had it 90 degrees, and when I got it in there, this fan, the case fan, was so close, like within, God, a millimeter or so of the cooler, that it just wasn't gonna work. So at that point, I had already had everything, you know, in there, so I had to take everything back out. I had to change this to be, you know, 90 degrees, and then I put it back in there. And even now, it's like, it's all barely in there. And again, I wanted a small form factor, but I think if I would have known that it was going to be quite this much trouble, I may have opted for something a little bigger. This stuff is like barely in here. And, you know, I don't know for certain that I have this up and running yet. But at least right now, it seems like everything is connected, and I managed to fit everything inside the case. So again, the links for all of this stuff will be in the description, but if you try to build this specific build, it might be worth your time to try and find a case that's just a hair bigger, or just be aware going into it that you're gonna have to remove that drive bay. That's going to be a big thing. And I asked Jeff, I said, could we get away with just having you know, the one fan. And he said maybe, but obviously the more cooling, the better, especially since the computer is so CPU intensive. So I was like, all right, well, it's ugly, but it will, you know, that bottom fan will, you know, clip in there. It's just kind of like barely in there. Anyway, this has taken far longer than I thought it would take. I mean, hours and hours and hours of just trying stuff, and then it wasn't working, and pulling it out and putting it back. So I am going to deal with all the software side tomorrow. So thank you so much for watching. If you are interested in this, cool, watch tomorrow's vlog. We'll try and get Windows installed on it, get some of the stuff set up, and, you know, fingers crossed, everything is fine here. I think it is. If it's not, it's probably something we can fix. But God, I hope I never have to change anything in this case ever, because it's barely in here, man. Dear God. And normally I do some cable management, but I have stuff like bent down and like barely in there, and I'm just like, as long as it's staying away from the fans. I might put some sort of a tie here and a tie here, but then that'll probably be it. Whew. Let's meet back tomorrow, shall we?